for the August 24th, 2020 regular board meeting at 6 o'clock. I'd like to welcome everybody who is here and everybody who will be watching. I'll do a roll call real quick. It looks like we have Cindy Cassidy, Roger Canoy, Sarah Hughes, Eddie Benami, and Jeremy Mask. Will Borseth here representing the board, and we'll go ahead and start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, I'm going to review the I-35 mission statement and the district's priorities. The Interstate 35 School District exists to develop lifelong learners and responsible, productive, successful citizens in an ever-changing society. Our district priorities: number one, articulate and support a cohesive, student-centered pre-K through 12 vision for continuous school improvement. Number two, engage in effective teaching and learning for the 21st century. Number three, operate with fiscal integrity, efficiency, and effectiveness. Everybody should have received the agenda. Take a moment if you want to discuss, and we're motioning for approval.
I move we approve the agenda.
I'll second it.
It's been properly moved and seconded that we approve the agenda. All those in favor signify by aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we'll go right into the open forum. Residents, students, parents, guardians, and staff members of the district may address the board about relevant topics. Those who wish to speak must sign up at the beginning of the meeting. Speakers' participation is limited to 5 minutes per meeting. We ask speakers to remember that Iowa law prohibits the board from discussing specific employees or students or their performance. Frank?
Thanks, everybody. Hey, I just want to tell the board, administrative, thank you from the bottom of my heart what you guys have done for our sports staff on preparation, listening to our concerns, and doing a good job. I mean, for a messed up year, it looked pretty decent today considering. I mean, really. You know, but again, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. It was good seeing the kids today. Thank you.
Thank you. Were the buses full today?
Probably, I guess mine was, I can speak for myself, it was like 3/4. Siblings don't want to sit with siblings. Imagine that.
I heard that
Shocking.
complaint tonight.
You know, other than, I can't wait to get an air-conditioned bus. But no, it was good. It was good to see my kids. Kids were happy to see me. Again, thank you for including us in Return to Learn. And again, thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thanks, Frank.
All right, the education spotlight.
So we're going to talk about the first day of school, but I did want to introduce Will Borseth. He's going to be our student representative. I told him it's 2 years, so don't run him out today, okay? But he will typically have his report again right after this education spotlight. So I just wanted to give him the opportunity to tell us a little bit about himself, and if he had anything you want to share about the first day, and then I'll kind of fill in.
Hello everyone, I'm Will Borseth. I'm sure you know me and my brothers very well. The first day was, I mean, how you'd expect with a bunch of changes, you know, some complaints here and there, but everyone's kind of getting the picture. It's obviously going to be confusing maybe the first 2-3 weeks, but I think everyone's going to get it pretty quickly.
Very good. Welcome, Will.
What do you hope to get out of this experience, if you don't mind me asking, so that we can maybe help you reach any goals that you might have doing this?
I think I just want to be kind of in an environment with people of maybe, I guess, authority and people who are going to change the school in a positive direction, of course.
I think Yeah, I'd love to hear your opinions, so whenever you want to speak up, I'm sure I speak for everyone. So you're obviously closer to the situations than we are, so thanks for your service.
Thank you for having me.
So as the day started, we had buses rolling in and teachers out meeting kids and greeting kids. We do realize that we have to adjust some of our spaces where kids 5-12 are meeting, and I would imagine Mr. Castro will talk a little bit about the first day in his report. We did find some things that work significantly better than they have in the past, which is always a good thing. We have kids with lanyards now with their ID and their lunch code, and they just go in and scan it, and it is very fast if it works right. The very beginning of the day was a little rough. We had some challenges with internet and Power School and our lunch program, but we got them worked out after the first lunch. And we still have some needs for custodial staff and some support staff. So if anybody knows of anybody that's interested in good hard work and great benefits, we'd love for you to talk to them about being a part of our team. But I think for kind of the crazy, as we talked about, this was a good start to the day. I went around to all the classes and through 8th grade and just said hi and welcomed people and talked a little bit about, being safe and that kind of thing. And everybody was happy. I mean, everybody was just happy to be here. So it was a good start for what I saw. So I'm sure the principals will elaborate a little bit in their reports, but.
All right. Sharon? Principal reports.
Well, like they both said, we're back. We're happy to be back. Kids were definitely excited. Seeing some of the energy on their faces as the buses were dropping off this morning, and it was kind of neat seeing everyone just lined up. If you go by it all the teachers were outside this morning with a big sign holding up their name, what grade. Most of the kids coming off the bus knew who their teacher was, and it was easy to help them find them. A few that didn't know, and we had plenty of support out there to help them find their teacher, and a lot of them seeing their friends for the first time in several months. So there's definitely a lot of excitement. Overall, the day I think went really well. It was very fast between the early out and just running around some schedule conflicts, trying to get some things fixed right off the bat. Some of the new processes that we had with lunch, just running that a little bit differently with specific tables and everything. Obviously, I think it'll get smoother over time as now kids know these are the tables for their class. And so the first day was a little slower, just trying to get everyone sat down and show them where they could sit. But once they kind of get used to a routine, it's going to be pretty easy. I think we'll be able to speed some things up. Other than it being warm in the classes, I saw a lot of good learning going on and a lot of excitement with the kids, and just happened to be there. And the teachers are happy to be back, I think. And at the end of the day, we did a staggered bus release, which went as smoothly as I could have hoped. Those first couple days, getting the buses lined up and getting all the kids on the right buses, and it's always a little bit of a hiccup, so it was a little slower getting the buses out today, but that's to be expected. It seems like every year the first day of school is about 10 minutes behind schedule on that evening routine, and we'll be able to speed things up a little bit. Right now we did a 2-minute delay between grades. I think over time we could probably narrow that down to even about a minute between grades. Once everyone knows where they're going, we'll get that process sped up a little bit. Other than that, I think everything went really well. I just did want to show you, we did get our devices in that we're going to go to PK2 students. It's one tab that you probably heard me mention a couple times. Finally came in end of late last week. Still trying to kind of get a grasp of exactly what it can do and how to use it best in the classroom, but it's just a little 7-inch touchscreen tablet. I brought one home over the weekend, kind of let my kids kind of get used to it, see what their first-hand experience was. Basically, you turn it on, it jumps right into kind of a diagnostic where the little avatar on the screen kind of walks you through some basic questions, kind of figure out what you already know, and then it customizes lessons for you based on that, math, reading, writing. It's kind of fun. The company that makes them, they're based out of London, so your little avatar has got a little British accent. And apparently a lot of the stuff is written for England. My daughter was playing with it. What's a lorry? One of the lessons we talk about a lorry. It's a truck. So it's kind of fun. But I think once we get that in the hands of the kids, it should be a good tool for them to use, kind of guide some of the lessons, and especially for our remote students. I think we have 21 remote PK4. So we'll definitely reach out to those families. We have an orientation coming up on Wednesday night to kind of get them started. And it was a great first day, best as we could hope for anyway, with what other people said, with all the crazy going on. It went pretty smoothly, and hope the rest of the year goes as well as today.
So when I dropped off Ivy this morning, I thought that was pretty slick, and having the teachers out there. She was already jumping out right there at Tucker Park, so.
Yeah, we're planning on doing that the first 3 days of school. So through Wednesday, we'll have everyone out there until by then, and the kids will really be comfortable as far as where their room is at, where their teachers are at, and again, I think every morning is just going to get a little smoother and smoother. And by Thursday, we'll be back down to the basic crew out front, and it'll be interesting. We have a lot of people in different roles with our win time first thing in the morning. All of our associates are kind of spoken for in those groups, so we'll get creative on who can be out front and greet kids, and we'll make do, and we'll have a great year.
Were there noticeable difficulties with today's mess on the first day? Or
Just the
any
heat.
comments?
Just the heat. My second grader, when he got home, he jumped right in the shower to take a cold shower because his face was still bright red. I stopped in at home before the meeting, and that's all he could say was he was very, very hot and uncomfortable. But it's exceptionally hot this week. So.
Any other questions or comments for Jeff? Okay, Steve.
And the secondary day went very, very similar to what you've already heard. The start of the day, I think I would like to thank our students first, just because watching them come up to the building today, I didn't know what to expect as far as were kids' understanding of the mask requirement. Was I going to need to stand next to the door because we had masks sitting out there for the kids that didn't wear them, and the first, I don't know, 100 kids that came through the door, I don't know that there were any that didn't have the mask on already before they came through the door. There might have been just after that. I know I got 2 of them fitted up with the masks that we have here. But again, I thank them for that, because we all want to be here, and if that's what we need to do to be here, then I think that speaks to our kids' willingness to do what they need to do to be in the place they want to be. So that I appreciate that, and that was the case for me on a regular basis, in and out of the classrooms. Every once in a while you'd walk in, and I walked in and I couldn't figure out this student was kind of back off in the corner. Well, they were back there in the mask break location, just taking a break, which is exactly what we asked for our teachers to do, because I kept looking like, maybe I should say something to that kid, and no, they were in their right spot doing what they were supposed to do. So that was a good example for me, good learning time for me. But I didn't go into rooms and think, oh, I need to remind the whole room. I think Sharon had mentioned she saw a group that reminded them today. But the 1 or 2 kids I saw in the hallway, they're very, I think it was more of a, they forgot about it rather than they were trying to get away with it, because they were coming out of lunch, lots going on, people they were talking to, and they, oh, yep, and then they put it up, and it was fine. So I think overall that went well for us today. It was good to walk around and hear the discussions going on, because that's really what we're here for, is to help get kids back in that, whether it's social setting or maybe it's, I don't know that there was a lot of in-depth learning that went on today, but a lot of introduction type stuff, which was very quick. I have a 5th and 6th grade class that I'm teaching this year, so that was very, very fast at the end of the day. So outside of that, I think Will kind of talked a little bit about the day, so it's good. We're glad we're here. The kids are excited. It was warm, I'll give you that, but I don't know that it took away with such a quick day. Our learning skills camp in the morning goes from, about an hour and 15 minutes, so 75 minutes, which really reduces our schedule on an early out day. So classes are only about 16 minutes period, and then lunchtime's just a hair longer than that. So overall, great day, glad we're here. We've got things like they all shared that went really well. We learned from them, and we'll be able to adjust just a little bit, and the more routine we get into things, the easier they'll be for everybody. So good day overall.
Steve, do you have the numbers, or maybe when you do the percentages or the numbers of remote learners versus in-house learners?
Yeah.
I have that in my report,
Okay,
but
perfect.
we can talk about it now if you guys don't have other questions for Steve.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Superintendent report.
Yeah, so I was just going to talk a little bit about last week's PD. We had actually 2 speakers, which we weren't planning on the one, but it worked out that he could come. We're working with a company out of Minneapolis or Minnesota. A researcher from the University of Minnesota has done a lot of work on behavior and looking at interventions to provide teachers to kind of equip them to deal with behavior challenges and students that are exhibiting different behaviors. And so last year, Rose Dickinson and I think 2 other teachers went to see him. His name is Dr. Clay Cook. We went to see him at DMAC. And after hearing his presentation and then being in contact with him, there's a school up by Cedar Rapids that has implemented this IM4 program. And really what it's about is empowering teachers with strategies that maybe they didn't learn when they were in school about dealing with some behaviors. And so we are working through what that looks like. And so Curtis Slater is one of the people who works with Dr. Clay Cook, and he came down and he was able to give our teachers a little bit of just a general perspective about how behaviors happen, why they happen, and what we can do to be proactive with those. So that was on Tuesday. And then on Wednesday we had Trevor Reagan here, and I've worked with Trevor several times, but his whole message was, his group is the Learner Lab, and it's all about how we learn best, optimal learning. And some of the things that he talked about were kind of a growth mindset, and knowing that there are going to be times when you have a fixed mindset, but if you can work towards that growth mindset, that obviously is best. But then he also talked about what inhibits us from learning. Same thing as adults with kids, things like fear and how you're supposed to react to that, because we have lots of anxieties and fears this year. So our staff had just some conversations around that, and I think both of those speakers were really good as far as we know that this year is going to be exceptional. I think it'll be exceptionally great, but I do think that it kind of helps people understand that it is okay to have anxiety about some of this. It is okay to have fear and frustration. And I was talking to a teacher today who I think is probably one of the most anxious that's been in contact with me. And when I saw him at lunch, I just said, "How is it going? How is it? How are things today?" And he said, "I had nightmares last night. I was worried about coming." And he said, "I got here and I was with my kids for 10 minutes. They had their masks on. They were doing the distancing. They were excited to be here, and I'm fine." Like, it was just having to kind of go through it. And I think we're going to see different scenarios like that throughout the year that we're just going to have to remember that, okay, this is new, this is different, so how's it going? And just asking our staff, that is going to be key. So I think that the PD last week, I think, did a lot to kind of help teachers be ready for this week. We have remote learner training on Wednesday for anybody that's remote learning. We have 94 students that opted to do remote learning. And it's a pretty even balance between the different grades. I think there's 35 at the middle school, 34 at the high school, 21 at the elementary. I hope that equals 94. If not, it's close. I don't remember if I added those up recently or not, but we've had a couple add. We did have questions about when people could come back, because you can go to remote learning at any time. because circumstances in your home changes or whatever. So you can go to remote learning at any time. Mr. Castor and I visited about coming back, and so we're going to do at the mid-quarter point, so about 4.5 weeks. So the first time any remote learners that are currently remote can come back into the building and be in-class learners will be 4.5 weeks from today. And then at the quarter, and then, because we thought a quarter is too long, if we need them here to get socialized and they're good about coming back, but we also need to be respectful of the teachers and the staff that we can't have a revolving door. So we're going to try the 4.5 week and see what that's like. That way we can communicate with anybody who's going to be in contact with those students so that they have time to prepare. So that training, I think some of the parents wanted to have a meeting so that they could see who else was doing it and they would know who is kind of somebody that they can have for support. So I thought that was a really good idea. So we have that on Wednesday. The last thing I have is we've had kind of a challenge with our auditorium. I don't know if any of you noticed that when you came for orientation, but our projector, I think we first realized it when we were getting ready for one of our trainings this parent question or answer night, and our big projector screen wouldn't come down. So we can't get up and look at it because you need a lift to get up there, but we noticed that there was water kind of up on the screen unit, and then there was kind of a water spot on the floor. So we had a lift come in, looked at it, and apparently water had accumulated in the casing where the mechanicals were for the screen, and it actually looks like it might have caught on fire. And so it cannot be used. So I was in contact, Rick was out last week, his father passed away, so I was in contact with Ben. They had the electrical guys come in with the lift, and they sent us pictures, and I mean I can share those, but it's not functional. So I visited with Ben, and we just talked through what the process is going to be, because there's been conversation around how they tied the two EFS walls together, and they caulked it, or they tried to caulk it and it didn't hold. They tried it again and it didn't hold, and now we have this damage. So they need the architects to come up with a fix, and then Kester come in and do the fix. And so I said, I'm okay with all that, and I'm glad about the process, but we also need to have the conversation about who's accountable for this so that we know that this is going to be part of the solution. And so he said, yes, that's all in that. So we're supposed to have a meeting this week. So I will give you an update the next time we meet. If not sooner, I'll just probably send you an email of what we talked about and where we are with it. But it is noticeable. There are boards missing on the stage. So if you have anybody asking, I wanted to make sure you were aware of where we are with that. So that's all I have.
Any questions for Sharon? All right, we'll move on to the consent agenda items. Everybody should have gotten their past meeting minutes. I think there was 3 sets there, was that correct? Board bills and the financial statements, and then the resignations and contracts. We have Nicole Kimmel hired as an elementary associate, Madeline Olson hired as an elementary associate, Christine Betheridge hired as a bus driver, Lexi Crozier hired as middle school head and assistant volleyball coach, Jamie Donner hired as the middle school student council advisor, Maggie Llewellyn hired as the middle school student council advisor, Jerry Young hired as the high school head robotics coach, and Cody Swim hired as the middle school assistant football coach. And then there was a few movements in the open enrollment as well. We would need a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda items, if anybody's so inclined.
I have a question first. So like with freshmen, since typically they vote on student council the spring before and we didn't have a spring, so what happens with that class?
I anticipate they're doing it this fall, is what I thought.
They're gonna work to get it done this fall.
What was the question?
The freshman class, typically they would vote their previous spring season for representatives. And since we didn't have a spring, I didn't know how that was left.
I don't have that time frame. I know Jason, Mr. Smith has talked about getting that freshman group involved. With homecoming being 2 weeks away, they're in the midst of getting that planned and details worked out of that right now. So I don't know where that falls in the priority list or timeline, but I'll ask.
That's just curious.
Yep.
How are the plans?
Developing.
Yeah.
I think they're good. I think the student council has been great about trying to keep as much in a traditional sense as possible, but making accommodations for whatever the guidelines are that we have already in place here at school. So they've been receptive of any feedback that I've given them or Mr. Smith has given them. So they're a good bunch to work with and very, very good at coming up with solutions if they identify a problem before they move it. So not just a, why can't we do this? It's a, what if we did this rather than, which I appreciate.
Okay.
All right, are there any questions on the consent agenda items or a motion?
I'll move to approve the consent agenda.
Second that.
It's been properly moved and seconded that we approve the consent agenda items. All those in favor signify by aye. Opposed by nay. Items for discussion are return to learn guidance from the state.
Yeah, I shared this with you guys because it's the most recent guidance that we've had. There's one that talks about reopening Iowa schools, which I think gives a as clear as can be picture of when we might have to move to remote learning, kind of what the criteria is for this. I think it's really important when you look at that community transmission section, the third one down there, where we look at possibly closing or canceling our school or closing our events at 15 to 20% positivity rate in a county on average over 14 days and a 10% absenteeism among students. And then when you look at community transmission, substantial uncontrolled, the next one, where we look at possibly closing school. One of our counties was very close to that number last week. And so we go with whichever of our 3 counties is highest. So I told staff if we would have 10% of our students gone, we could easily be in school on Wednesday and not be here on Thursday. So I think that kind of hit home that we do have to keep our kids safe. We have to wear our masks. We have to do as much social distancing as we can because we want to be here. But I think this kind of lays out how that's determined in a succinct form. If we get to that point, I will be sending a letter out explaining it in a little bit more detail to parents, but that's for your information. The other one is the evaluating sick and students and staff. I'm sorry.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
About that one. If we were to hit one of those thresholds, do we have to have the state's permission to make decisions?
So you have to hit both. You can't just hit one. You have to hit both thresholds, and you have to petition the state, yes. If they were to not, so this is what they're telling us they will approve it for. But if they were to deny it, so let's say that we had 13% positivity in the county, but our attendance was, we had 25% of our students gone. And we just decided we were going to petition the state, because we can petition the state at any time to close. If they denied that, then even if we thought it was in the best interest for our kids to be out of school, which that's why we would make the decision, the state can deny our petition. We can still keep them out of school, but we have to make those days up in the summer, when school's out. So we would have to add those days if the state doesn't approve it in the summer.
I know every school district, their situations are going to be different, the criteria that they're all looking at is going to be different, the populations are different, and just, it seems like we would probably know better than anybody what we should do.
Right. We always have the option, but we have to make those days if the state doesn't approve them.
And there are school districts that are currently under this, and they've been approved. They've
Correct.
petitioned and they've been approved.
Correct, and then some have been denied.
Some have been denied.
Mhm.
Okay.
Have they given any guidance as how quickly they would answer?
Within 2 days.
2 days,
Yes.
okay.
But
That's what I
that
was
doesn't
trying to
help us,
remember.
we
Yeah.
probably just say we're doing it, and then we,
Yeah.
because you can't wait 2 days if you've got,
No.
25% of your kids gone, that doesn't make any
Yeah,
sense, so.
that's, yeah.
Okay, go on with
Okay, the other one is the return to learn, the evaluating 6 students and staff, and this one is a little trickier. The Labor Management Committee and I met last week to kind of go through this. We had brought to you a return to work plan in July. Well, this is now updated, so that we have to just verify that we're all now considered essential employees at the district or at the schools, but I think it's gonna be, again, a case-by-case basis. How do employees that need to be home in quarantine get paid? How or what leave do they take? What happens if they're at home but they're not really sick? Can they work from home? All of those kinds of questions. So this has given us a little bit more guidance. That team is meeting tomorrow, I think. Yeah, Tuesday, to kind of go through that and make sure that we have those things articulated. I think everybody on that team understands that we might have to meet a little more frequently as we get started with this, just if we have unusual situations come up, because we want to obviously keep our students and our staff safe, but we also have to be mindful of employees and their concerns. So I think that committee is really committed to working through this as things come up. So that's the guidance that we have for evaluating 6 students and staff. I just thought you should see the updated so you understand why some of the things are in place that are. So one of the biggest things is that if a student is in the household with somebody who tests positive, they are expected to quarantine for 14 days. If a staff member is in the household and they're not the primary caregiver, they're an essential worker, and if they have no symptoms and no fever, they're expected to come back to work. Doesn't make much sense, but that's the guidance. So I think that just working through those situations as they come up is going to be the key, and trying to be as consistent as possible, knowing that not everything fits in the same lane, right? Some things are outliers, and we just have to have conversations around that. So,
And the rationale for that decision is to have adequately staffed.
yeah, because I don't know if you've been kind of paying attention.
Yeah.
Indianola had 7 middle school teachers that have to quarantine
Yep.
because they were in close contact last week I think at professional development. I talked actually to the superintendent in Indianola today, and I just said, what are you guys doing? Are you going to have them come back? And he said, well, we're trying our best to get it covered, but we might not be able to, because the staffing or substitute shortage is, it's always been a concern. Now it's doubly a concern because most of our subs are in the high risk category and they're not coming back to schools. So one of the things that did change in the guidance from the state last week is if a teacher is home, let's say that I teach at college comp this semester, so if I'm home but I'm not ill, I just have to quarantine at home for whatever reason, I can still instruct virtually. So my kids can meet in a classroom, I can be delivering that content and it counts. So instead of having a sub necessarily, we need to have a facilitator for that learning. Somebody who can make sure that the computer's working and the projection's working, and that's a big change from what it's been in the past. So we'll have to work through and see what that looks like as we kind of go through this new world. But we have talked about if we have like associates that can't be at work, are there things that we can have them do so that they can still get paid and work from home? And so we're trying to brainstorm what that can be, because we do want to respect people and their willingness to work, and we understand that some of this is out of their control as far as how many days they're home, and so we're having those conversations, but I just anticipate it'll be the next several weeks and months that we're dealing with it, and it'll be an ongoing process. So I just wanted you to have the most updated guidance because so much of what we decided is because of these kinds of documents.
Any questions or concerns or commentary on any of this?
I guess keeping in the positive tone, at least the guidance is fairly clear from the state. Here's
Yes.
the rules we're playing by. It's better than what we had before.
Correct. Correct. We might not all agree with it, but we have the guidance, so we at least know now what the expectation is.
And so when it says greater than 20% positivity in a county, is that the number of tests that are taken? It's like,
That all factors into it, and Brandy, I don't know if you know more about that than I do, but it's all a matter of who gets tested.
right,
And so the challenge we have, and I think the group kind of remembers this from, if you're not tested, you could be asymptomatic, and we could have a whole slew of people
right,
that, if you think about 60% come up as being positive when they test, so they're going to get tested because they have symptoms. There's another 40% that aren't tested that have the COVID but aren't symptomatic, but they're transmitting it. So you have to take it for what it's worth. I don't know, it's a number, but it is based on the number of tests, but it's also not real indicative of really how much is out there because so many people don't get tested
right.
that are asymptomatic, so,
Well, it's just an interesting that they keyed on that statistic.
yes.
Thank you. And where are we at now, just for like the highest county within the?
Did you look at that today?
I didn't look at it today. We're-
Clark County is our highest
yeah,
county.
They're relatively low compared to what they were.
Right.
Okay.
I want to say they might be at 6, and that was maybe yesterday's data, 6%.
But then they had a testing site there this weekend, so I would imagine that number is going to increase when those tests get back because more people are tested.
Right. It'd just be, if that's a public metric, and that's what we're held to, it'd be nice to have the link somewhere on our website so that.
Yeah, we can
people
put that on
say-
there.
People could say, well,
Yeah.
looks like we might have a,
Yeah, we could definitely put that on
if
there.
that's easy.
Yep,
Thank you. That way you don't have to get a
yep.
whole bunch of questions from me and everybody else. Where are we at?
As I say, I'll still ask.
Yeah, I'll probably still.
Yeah, I was
ask
gonna say, if that
everything.
guarantees that people aren't
Well,
gonna ask,
yeah.
I'll throw that up
You were good.
before I leave today.
You got
Clark is at 6.5%.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's a 14-day rolling average.
Okay.
See, I've tried finding those numbers and I can't find them.
Yeah, I don't.
It's coronavirus.iowa.gov.
Is that right?
Underneath percent positive cases by county.
Really easy to find, I guess, if you're out there.
Well, you guys are all talking, a guy who didn't get his email synced up to his phone for 3 years.
And, Warren, just for reference, Warren is at 5.8, and I haven't found Madison yet.
Yeah. Okay.
I think my biggest concern with that is that's indicative of the whole county, right? So, you look at Osceola as a hot spot, but I think of our school as a little community as well. And so if we're seeing significant COVID cases, but the county's not,
Right.
I have real concerns about us having to wait until we're at 20% in the county before we make a decision about what's best for kids. Because if we have 100 kids running around here with COVID and we're not taking action, I think we're being negligent, obviously, for the health and safety of everybody here. So I think that's the biggest point of contention
Right.
with this metrics is that while it to some degree makes sense, it a lot of ways doesn't make sense for what schools need. So, if Indianola has spikes, they're not even in our district. But if New Virginia has several spikes, then obviously that's more concerning. So I think that's what schools are most frustrated
But the
with.
statistics don't specify Indianola versus New Virginia.
No, it's all of Warren County.
So
Yep, so that's my biggest concern with this is,
there just seems to be so much inconsistency on where testing takes place and where it's centered, so.
Yeah.
It's tough, it's tough.
And what I understand is that we can, like, if we suspect or a kid has a temperature, doesn't feel well, whatever, we can request that they get tested, but we can't require.
Correct.
Correct. Or family or staff, whatever.
Any other conversation? Teacher Leadership Committee.
So each year, the Teacher Leadership Committee meets. It's a committee of the union and of the administration. We are allocated, this year it's $289,143 for our Teacher Leadership Program. I don't know if you remember kind of how that originated, but it's a pile of money that can only be used for teacher leadership. The idea is to retain teachers, to give them opportunities to grow and develop, and that kind of thought process. It's, I think, an extremely beneficial program. We have our teacher leaders that are actually full release in that. We also have some mentors. We are looking at developing mentorships along the same lines for some of our support staff, based on what we're seeing with the success in our teacher leadership. So that $289,000 gets divvied up every year. We use it for salaries, for stipends, for professional development, anything like that. We did have one recommendation. We did have our PLC facilitators get a stipend out of that last year. Those are happening during the day now, so they're not outside of the contract. So we're not going to pay those stipends because it's just part of what their day consists of. So we are actually going to pull in 4 or 5 remote learning liaisons, people who are working with our families and our teachers and our students to make sure that they have the supports that they need, and then work towards what kind of professional development do we need to give teachers as a result of what we're seeing in the remote learning process. So each of those remote learning liaisons will be assigned a kind of a classroom almost of about 20 kids, and most of them will be families. Well, they'll be in contact with those families to check on social emotional health, to check on academic progress, to set up possible appointments to visit with teachers or work through any challenges with assessment, to coordinate with Rose Dickinson about additional supports that the students and families might need. So those are ads. So we're going to take the PLCs off and we're going to add those 5 positions. So
that's above and those are teachers that we already have employed and we're taking that on.
correct. Yep, and they don't get time out of the day to do it, so that's why they're getting the stipend, so that they would, about an hour, I mean, as we get started, it'll be more time during the week, but then just checking in and doing some follow-ups with families, we anticipate it'll be an hour to 2 hours each week. So again, that's not anything for, just more for your information. So if you hear about the remote learning liaisons, that does come out of teacher leadership. So that stipend comes out of this fund.
Just a question. It shows, the total of what we have and then what we're allocated. Does that money, just because I'm new, does that money roll over to the next year?
It does, yes.
Okay.
Yes. And we try and probably have about a $20,000 balance, just because of PD. Some years we might send a team of teachers somewhere that's going to cost us $10,000, and another year we might do something where they learn remotely. So it doesn't cost us but $1,000. So we like to have a little bit of a balance there, since some of it is tied to salaries.
All right, not hearing any other questions, we'll move on to legislative priorities. This does take a motion and a second and a vote to approve the legislative priorities as we see them.
So this is all you. I sent you the sheet or the information from IASB about what they did this year for the legislative session. And then they always look at what were things that they had talked about that maybe didn't get passed. So those are the things that they look at as starting the conversation for next year. So you have that information there. So really, you just need to tell me what the 2 or 3 priorities are that you want IASB to advocate for. And then if there's anything that's not on here that you want us to add, or want IASB to advocate for, then you just let us know, we can write it in.
So this document was fairly lengthy. I think it's 18 pages with different priorities, and I'm not sure if everybody was able to go through the whole thing or what they saw. Sharon, did you have an opportunity to go through it?
I did. What you want to look at is starting on about page 11, because then they're broken down by topics.
So these is last year's, or this is the ones?
This is last year, but they use this as the springboard for, so the ones that were priorities last year that they didn't really address or advocate, or no action was taken, they move those over to the next year, and then they add any that schools come up with.
So as we read through these, Sharon, what I've prioritized in my own head has changed about 8 times. Because every time I read through it, I'm like, ooh, that's something we need to prioritize. I mean, there's a lot of important stuff there. But as the superintendent of the district, having gone through, did you have any that struck out to you that would be beneficial for the I-35 school district? Just in that bubble, knowing that.
Yeah, so the 2 that I would pick, that I would ask you to entertain are the school funding policy, to make sure that we have on-time funding and that it's adequate. This, the 2.4%, that was the highest it's been in 11 years, which we can't do that and keep quality people. So I think we need to really kind of ask for them to prioritize that as being something that's important. And the other thing that I would ask is the preschool. Because of our location, if you remember, we have 40 preschoolers, 38 preschoolers, and all but 1 are here full day. So parents have to pay for half the day. This would put it in that if we had a full day programming, they would get a 1 student count weight, which would then make the program accessible for parents without them having to pay for the half a day that the state doesn't cover right now. I think that's vitally important. Number 1, because preschool is so important, but number 2, because of our location and just the logistics of getting kids back and forth and trying to figure that out for parents who only want to do the half-day free program, I think is really burdensome. So I'd rather have them in school for the full day and have the state give us credit for that, as opposed to just the parents trying to make it work and maybe making it a barrier to kids being in our preschool. There's lots of other good ones. Mental health is always good. I think my challenge with that is nobody knows what to do with it. So instead of just throwing money at it, I'd like to have some more direction on what they want to propose. We have a school-based mental health therapist, which I think is a great use of our resources. So if they could say, you show us what your plan is, kind of like what they do with At Risk, you show us what your plan is and we'll give you an amount of money to do that plan, I think that would be very beneficial. But right now, the conversation is, we'll give money to the AEAs or we'll give money to these, and it's not necessarily what we need. So I'm just a little hesitant with that one. I know we need mental health services, but I also am leery of I don't want one blanket approach to all schools because we don't all have the same needs. So
Yeah, because that was the one that kind of stuck out to me that I would have
Yeah.
rose to the top, but
Yeah.
you make good points there.
So one of them that I looked at, the first time I reviewed this list was the market competitive wages.
Yes.
Do you believe that the school funding initiative, if we look at that, and kind of take two birds with one stone and all about one right there?
Yep.
If you're only giving us two, let's see how many we can drop.
Right. Well, and
Realistically.
yeah, for those of you that are new, I don't know if you're aware of this, but we did not have, so our funding formula is tied directly to our number of students, right? So when we graduated a bigger class than we brought in, even though we had an increase of 15 students in the district, we were down 7 students though because the numbers were that much of a variance. So when we have negotiations, and I'll use Frank as an example, we might get a 2.1% increase from the state, but because of our number of students that we've decreased, we don't get anything. Like we're at 0. Well, it's really hard to recognize our staff and support our staff and continue to keep really high quality staff here and still offer the benefits that we do, which we know is one of the reasons why they're here, and with no increase. I mean, we would have had to have seen a what, 2.8, 2.6, 2.8% increase to even see a positive in what we could do to negotiate. And that really makes it challenging when you're looking at that. So because of that, the way the funding formula is structured, if we could get on-time funding for the staff that we have and the students that we have that was adequate to meet even cost of living, not that that's the measure, but we haven't even had cost of living increases in 11 years. I don't know what the state expects us to do to support our staff. It's really challenging. So I think you're right. I think that could be bundled together and we could say on-time school funding with, this is the caveat and kind of lump them together.
Has anybody identified any priorities that are not listed here?
Pretty comprehensive list.
It is.
Well, and even the expanding educational opportunities, that's an interesting one, but we're definitely, expanding the online opportunities for kids and, we're almost forced to in this environment. So a lot of these are kind of being touched with this crazy situation.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, does anybody have anything, or are we still looking at it? So what I gleaned from our conversation was school funding number 18, preschool number 3, is that correct? Governance 26 and 27.
And then, was it 13 that you had mentioned, Roger, the market and competitive wages?
Yeah, but we need to get a more focused approach and really link the school funding as our
Okay.
conversation.
Yeah, and that 27, I think, is already, I was just making the comment. I think it's an important one, but it's already almost forced upon us as a
Right.
district.
So when we say top legislative priorities, are we really talking two, Shannon?
2 or 3. I mean, they'll just take all of them from all the school boards in Iowa and look at the most common and then, so if we wanted to send 3, I don't think they're gonna.
Has Margaret weighed in on this list?
Yes, I mean, we do, if you've been to the RSAI kind of work session, we go through this and we move around the room and we put stickers on the ones that we think are the most important, and they're the same kinds of things. I think with rural schools, mental health is a big one, sharing options is a big one, opening those up a little bit more so that there's more sharing opportunities. A lot of whole grade sharing conversations because so many of our rural districts are in those kinds of situations. So
is there the sharing portion covers just certain aspects, right?
if you share, you get a certain number of kids that you can count in your
But is there certain
enrollment.
categories you can share? Or
Yes.
Could we
No.
share a custodian with someone?
We do share a maintenance director.
Okay.
We do share maintenance. So right now we share maintenance, we share HR, we share curriculum, and transportation. So those are the 4 that we share. And our weighting, we get up to, I want to say 21 students, but that number might not be right. That might be where we are.
23.
Yeah. So Ted can share, I can share, and I think that's about it, other than what we have. Social work can share.
Did you mention HR?
We do have HR that already shares with Southeast Warren. So we have the capacity to share to get a few more dollars. But as we talked about with the social work position, if we need it here, I don't want to share it just to get the money. I want to provide the services for our kids and then look at other options. So they had talked about having possibly an SRO, possibly doing some of the counselors. So if you are almost like the college counselor where you do a lot of post-secondary counseling with students, that person could share among districts. You know, some of those kinds of people that districts have a need for, but maybe don't want to have full-time. So there's lots of conversations around sharing those kinds of positions and adding those, but right now they're not part of the equation. So it's not, we can't share just anything.
And RSAI has been fairly effective in the bus. The bus
Transportation equity.
and equity.
Yep.
And then like we've gotten SAVE and Pebble extended through the
Correct.
sunset.
And I would say that Save and Pebble was IASB, SAI. I think all the groups worked on that one because it was a no-brainer.
Yeah.
So, but RSAI does do a lot for advocacy.
And are they fairly aligned in what they?
For the most part, yeah. Yeah.
I just know RSAI usually has a pretty good thumb on also what's going
Yeah.
on.
ISEA, I think, usually kind of works more towards, things that center around teachers, obviously. I know SAI did a lot of work last year on teachers, hiring teachers and the process for that. So each group has their own little nuances, but overall they want to make sure schools are funded and that they can operate effectively. But they do have some specific things to their programs.
Any other discussion or questions or anything else we want to look at here? So if we're going to do anything, if we're going to push any of the legislative priorities, we do need a motion and a second and a vote to do so. Ted, do you have what we kind of identified?
I've got 18, 3, 26, 27. You scratched 27.
27 is scratched.
And I think for 18, it would be in conjunction, we would write in part of 13 with that for the retention of teachers. Because if they want to create a separate fund for that, and I think it's got to be retention of staff. I don't think it's just teachers. We're still short. Like I said, it's tough getting bus drivers, it's tough getting custodians. So I would say retention of staff, but.
And we can have Ted read that.
make a motion. The worst you can do is tell me no.
Oh, you can make the motion if you want the collaborative effort, we can do that.
I move that we make our legislation priorities as listed in this document, number 3, preschool, number 18, which is school funding policy, which we should also include number 13, which includes market competitive wages, and number 26, which is local accountability and decision making.
I'll second that.
Have you identified the second?
It doesn't matter, go ahead.
All right, it's been properly moved and seconded that we, how was that, Ted?
Number 3, number 18, school funding policy, including number 13, market competitive wages, and number 26, local accountability and decision making.
All right, all those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. All right, remote learning guide overview. No action will be needed, this is just for discussion.
Yep, and I just wanted you to see where we are. I think we've got some good steps for our students that are learning remotely. I'm not going to go through that whole list, but I mean, you guys can look at those. We do have our open house this week on Wednesday. Those remote learners will kind of work through Schoology and some of the online pieces starting on Thursday, but the actual academic pieces will start on Monday. We anticipate they'll be very close to where the students in school are, just because our periods are so short this week. So the expectation is that those students get the same assessments, the same assignments, or comparable to fit the needs of where they are. We do have the learning kits that the elementary put together, so when teachers are having students do activities, they're using the same manipulatives in class that they have access to at home, and those are all things that we're providing to those families. So we still are working out assessment pieces because we think it's important that students assess with us, but there are some that they're going to do at home, and what does that look like for proctoring it, and so we're working out some of the details on that, but I think that's going to be really trial and error as we go through it. So this plan again is going to be one that looks a whole lot different in October than it does right now, but I think we're ready to start rolling that out to students starting next week. So.
I know for remote learners, I saw something about them being able to participate in athletics. Is that other extracurricular activities? Co-curricular activities as well?
Yes. Steve, do you want to talk a little bit to that?
Sure.
We think we had some band people, and you want to just speak to that?
Yeah. So band, I think, is probably the best example because we have students that are remote learning and want to be at home participating in band, and we've encouraged kids that if that's their interest, then they should continue that pursuit. We have also said that if they need to come in for a lesson, or maybe their performances look a little bit different, but are still acceptable to meet the standard of the class, then Fridays would be that day that students would come in. So starting September 11th, we'll be able to have teachers have a little bit more access to kids on those days because of the way we'll structure those days.
So that's co-curricular activity. What about like extracurricular, whether it be drama or musical or?
As far as would they be interested in participating?
Is there any that are participating, and how does that work? Do they?
Yeah, I don't know that I can think of an example with an extracurricular student. You? Sure.
That are remote.
Yeah,
I think the ones that had asked me about are actually in person, but they can participate.
They can, yes.
Okay. I just don't want to, I hate to see kids that don't have the opportunities, but
Right. I mean, as long as they're still making the same progress, that, you know, so they have to be in attendance, they have to be making progress towards. So as long as they're doing all those things, they can participate. It's just like homeschooled students that are dual enrolled who come to us for sports, same thing. They have the opportunity to participate.
I do have a middle school one now that I'm thinking about that. There's one just because of the middle school football stuff that I know there's a remote learning family there, and I've just been in touch with that parent, same as I have been with any other parent, and that student or students will be here to participate. I think we talked today in our admin meeting, the communication with those remote learners, not to deter from the conversation here, but communication with the remote learners and remote learner parents will need to be as on point as communication has been ever for us. Just because there's that gap of we don't see the kids in the hallway, we can't just talk to them quickly or touch base with them quickly, so we're going to have to be very diligent about making sure we're getting that information out in a timely manner and it's crystal clear.
Do you think after COVID is gone, 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now, will the remote learning option be available to our students?
I would
And again,
like,
this is a theoretical question.
yeah, I would like to make it an option available. Just because some students learn better that way.
Yeah, I'm wondering, yeah, right, because we're going to start getting assessments, we're going to start getting data, you know, with this and to see how this.
I can actually see more of a hybrid model where they come here for some classes or from some labs, and then they're working internships and exploring things outside of and coordinating with facilitation of learning here. And I think this plan kind of sets the base for that. And as we develop Fridays, that's kind of the mentality behind it is, what do you need given this day and age to be where you want to be, whatever you do next, and how do we accommodate that? So
And of the 94 kids, that's about 15% of our enrollment?
I think it's 13.
I mean, just rough.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, about 13.
Did, when they opted for remote learning, did they ask if it was, or did they say that their safety was, they felt better safe at home, or was this just more convenient?
We didn't ask.
Yeah.
To be honest, we
And
didn't
I don't-
ask.
Yeah. But it'd be interesting to see what percent was just more, you know, learns better that way, or
Right.
or was it, and again, I know we can't ask all those questions, but.
Is it an easy step towards homeschooling? Because
Right.
curriculum's there.
Right, it's
You're always
all,
kind of on the fence and you kind of made that
I
decision.
wanted to try it,
Likely
there's no better time.
Yeah, we do have some that did go to homeschooling that are not going to be enrolled at all. So I anticipate that our enrollment will go down again, just for lots of these factors. But
And you would think about the same percent would be, you know, homeschooled throughout the district. So is Iowa going to take that into account when they're looking at how to fund schools this year?
well, it'd be nice, but I doubt it.
Yeah.
Should that be one of our legislative priorities?
Well, I don't know, if even if you keep the pot the same and everybody's enrollment drops.
Right. Well, we have the 101% guarantee,
Yeah,
which I mean helps us some, but it doesn't give us anything extra for
Right.
increases. I mean, obviously that the challenge we're going to have, to be quite honest, is if we do this right and we have a solid remote plan, we might need a teacher that teaches half day of science and a half day of math remotely, right? And then we need teachers in the building that do that same thing, maybe a full-time and a full-time. It's going to be a matter of shifting staff and looking at what staffing we have, because if we continue to see decreases in numbers, whether it's homeschooling or just decrease in enrollment, we're going to have to decrease staff. That's the only option we have. So how do we do that and still provide as many opportunities to students as possible? I mean, and if we can be on the proactive side of that as people retire or leave, then that helps us in the long run. And so I think planning for that for 2 or 3 or 4 years from now really helps us get in position to do that now and be effective, instead of in 4 years saying, oh, we have to cut $100,000 from our budget. Who are we gonna, what program are we gonna let go, or what are we gonna do?
I'm sorry for all the questions, but do the homeschoolers know that we had, like, remote learning is maybe different than what they had seen in the past? It's much more robust. And when do they get the opportunity to come back?
Homeschoolers can come back anytime.
Okay.
Remote learners at that mid-quarter
Yep.
is what we decided. But we did talk to the families who chose remote learning and said we do have this option.
Who
But
chose
they-
homeschooling?
I'm sorry, the ones who chose
Yeah.
homeschooling. We do have this option, but they still chose homeschooling.
Yep. Nope, as long as they know that
Yep.
option is available.
And it might be that they want to see what it actually rolls out to be, you know, because it's so
Oh,
new.
no, yeah.
I don't
It's a free
know.
option in many ways. Okay, very good. So of the, okay, we had 91 remote learners. How many homeschooled?
Oh,
I might
you
be.
guys remember from your building? I want to say 5 to 7.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, people that were in the district last year that are going to be homeschooled this year, so we will not get to count them in our funding.
Okay.
No,
No, I was
no.
hoping it wasn't another 94.
yeah, no, it's about, I would say 5 to 7.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. So remote learners, we still get a student stipend, right?
Yeah, they count as a
They
full-time
count as a
student.
full-time student, okay.
As long as they're making the same progress, which is why we wanted our program to be the same,
Yep.
then we count them as a full student.
Great. Thank you.
I think an unintended benefit with either having a hybrid model or the full remote model is for those that plan on post-secondary opportunities, it prepares them for that.
Correct.
Of learning how it works and be second nature to them. Steve, I meant to ask you earlier, and I think you started alluding to it at the beginning of the meeting, but with the high school coming into the library and then the middle school going into the auditorium, was that congested with the number of students, or I think you're gonna say
Yeah,
something about that.
I meant to follow up on that because Sharon had mentioned it. It was, the commons in the auditorium worked extremely well. With 5th and 6th grade in the commons, 7th and 8th grade was in the auditorium. The high school was crowded down here. So I had no idea what to expect for students on that first day. I think we had a lot of kids here that just wanted to come and do a little socializing because they haven't seen their friends in a while. So I would look for the number of high school kids to dwindle over the next week or so, because as soon as they realize they can come in 5 minutes before class starts, they will. I just think they will. So, but we did set up an additional space in the wrestling room, actually, with chairs and tables, so that we can have more of a socializing place and more of a study type place down here. So we're going to try that tomorrow and see how that goes. Otherwise, it would, well, we have our, the students now have their ID cards, so they'll be able to scan into their locations when they come in tomorrow. So we'll have that piece in place also.
Last question, I promise. The Panorama, is it the Panora volleyball game tomorrow night, is available online, so it's streaming by their school. Do we have that capability? Or are we working on it?
Everybody looks at Mr. Tessa right now.
Yeah.
He would be the one to answer that.
I mean, theoretically, yes, we have the hardware, the thing would be personnel. Who do we have that's color commentary that would sit there and call a game?
Oh, gotcha.
If we would have that, then, I mean, we live streamed a band concert, we live streamed graduation until we had tech issues, so I mean, we have
You
the,
could bare bones it though and not have a color commentary.
Yeah, I don't think we need
They
commentary
can
at
still
all.
need
I'm just
somebody
talking about.
to run it.
Yeah.
To run the camera of where the ball is or where
Gotcha.
the play is.
George Hartsfield did that.
Yeah, I know.
yeah, I mean, if you just set up a static camera and that's good enough, or if you need someone to.
Well, we could do Facebook Live it if the parents is there.
Depends on the sport. I mean, you could probably capture volleyball in one window, but I'm not sure you're going to get 100 yards
No, you're definitely not
and be able to see what's going on.
Yeah, it was just an idea.
But I think we did have a parent ask about that. We're not opposed to it. We actually had that as part of Julie Kordick, our tech coordinator's kind of job description, is if she could offer that as an internship for students that might be interested in it, she could work with them on that live streaming and make that available. So we have talked about it. We probably won't get it done for Thursday
No.
volleyball game, but we are. That's been part of our conversation for 4 or 5 months, just because if people don't feel comfortable, we still want them to be able to experience like grandparents and,
Right.
you know, so we might try and do a couple of games this fall and see how it goes.
Yeah.
But it's gonna be a learning process, just like everything this year.
And would it be, I lied, it's the last question. So if I had Facebook and I wanted to put it on Facebook Live, is that a violation of any content that I-35 or, you know,
Well, we probably wouldn't let you put it on our website.
not on your website, but I'm just, you know.
And I would say it probably is a violation of some sort because I don't think you can film our students
Okay.
and display them.
They're in public though, right?
I don't know, there's always someone who takes video of their kids playing football or basketball.
Right, but they don't publish it online.
On Facebook.
Yeah, they do, they've done it in softball games, and.
I don't know that they should, but I can't
That's why
stop.
I was asking.
I can't stop people from doing that, but because you're showing kids that are not yours, I think that's probably
The
the sticking point.
The other piece would be postseason play, because the state would not
Right.
allow broadcast of anything that's postseason. So
That-
regional baseball, softball, any playoff that would be for football or any other sport, district track, because that's the state's money and they want to make sure nobody's watching that for free.
No passes work with those.
No, they do not.
But I do think you can pay
You can,
to
yes,
live stream those.
yes. You
Right.
can pay.
But it's a
who was
hefty,
it? Doug New Hartford, you pay a cost, and then it's like a production cost, which gives the state their cut, and then you can broadcast out to your patrons.
I believe they paid $400 to do that, and they had sponsors that picked up that.
All right, any other questions, Eddie?
No, done.
Anybody else? No, I'm glad you had all those questions, they're good questions. All right, if that's nothing else, I would like to take just a moment and thank everybody at the school, administration, custodians, cooks, bus drivers, nurse, teachers, for making today a successful day. And I'd like to thank the students for doing what they did today to make it a successful day as well. Hopefully we continue to have a successful year.
You know.
If there's nothing else, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
And what do we adjourn?
I second that.
Properly moved and seconded that we go into adjournment. All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? We're adjourned. It is 7:18.